Marine Gurukul Online Academy is pleased to announce a number of online modules to help the students understand the content better, the subject better, and also help in passing the examination. For details, do keep watching out for our notification on our channel, YouTube channel, and we look forward to your joining the module that you may feel you need the most. Thank you very much. Hello, welcome to Marine Gurukul video series. We are pleased to present this video titled Grain Stability 1 that shall cover the stability requirements as per grain code for ships with document of authorization. First of all, let us understand what is grain cargo and what is it that it requires special care. That means what is its additional hazard on ship stability. Grain covers wheat, maize, oats, rye, barley, rice, pulses, seeds, and processed forms of all these whose behavior is similar to that of grain in its natural state. So grain is not one cargo, it's a list of cargoes which behave in a similar manner. Now what is this similar manner or that behavior we are talking about? These cargoes have a low angle of repose, usually around 20 degrees, but we can say typically below 30 degrees. The low angle of repose puts the grain cargoes in the category of free flowing. That means they have a tendency to shift with small inclination of the vessel from side to side. When grain is loaded in bulk, some voids are inevitable even if the cargo is declared to be filled, trimmed. After loading, as the ship sets sailing, the hull vibrations and the ship's motion in the seaway makes the grain settle and compact, thus creating additional void on top. The void and the free-flowing nature of grain presents the hazard of grain shifting from one side to the other as the vessel rolls. Why do we need special stability requirements for such ships, that is ships which carry grain in bulk? Shifting of grain cargo from side to side as just discussed reduces the stability of the vessel, something very similar to the free surface effect in the slack tanks. Of course, the fluidity of the liquids would be more than the fluidity of the grain cargo. To ensure the safety of such ships, we not only need enhanced stability requirements, but also special guidance and precautions on loading, stowage, securing, and steps to minimize the risk of grain shift. Such special requirements are contained in IMO's International Code for Safe Carriage of Grain in Bulk, usually referred to as Grain Code. The requirements of the Grain Code apply only to the ships that carry grain in bulk. Now let us learn few definitions as per Grain Code so that when we use these terms, we know exactly what they mean. First, we start with definition of grain. We studied it a while back. Grain covers wheat, maize, oats, rye, barley, rice, pulses, seeds, and processed forms thereof, whose behavior is very similar to the grain in its natural state. Filled compartment trimmed refers to any cargo space in which, after loading and trimming, as required under section A10.2 of the grain code, the bulk grain is at its highest possible level in the compartment. That means there are two requirements here. One, The trimming should be as per section A10.2, and secondly, the grain must be at its highest possible level in the compartment. Filled compartment untrimmed refers to a cargo space which is filled to the maximum extent possible in the way of the hatch opening, but which has not been trimmed outside the periphery of the hatch opening, either by the provisions of section A 10.3.1 for all ships or section A 10.3.2 for specially suitable compartments. Now, since it may be a little difficult to remember these sections, so we can, if you wish, you can avoid these and replace this part by these few words. And now we can read the definition once again. Filled compartment untrimmed refers to a cargo space which is filled to the maximum extent possible in the hatch opening, but has not been trimmed outside the periphery of the hatch opening as required under the applicable provisions of the grain code. So here also the requirement is the cargo should be filled up to the maximum extent possible. It is to be trimmed in the hatchway, but it is not been trimmed outside the periphery of the hatchway. Partly filled compartments refer to any cargo space wherein bulk grain is not loaded in accordance or as described in the sections A 2.2 and section A 2.3 of the grain code. What is section A 2.2? That is the definition of filled compartment trimmed. What is section A 2.3? That is the definition of filled compartment untrimmed. So just to simply say, partly filled compartment refers to compartment carrying bulk grain but not falling under the category of filled compartment trimmed or filled compartment untrimmed. Angle of flooding theta 1 means the angle of heel at which openings in the hull, superstructures or deck houses which cannot be closed weathertight immerse. In applying this definition, small openings through which progressive flooding cannot take place need not be considered as open. So please pay attention. As per grain code, angle of flooding is the angle of heel at which the openings that cannot be closed weathertight immerse. Document of authorization. A document of authorization shall be issued to every ship loaded in accordance with the regulations of the grain code. The document of authorization shall be issued by the administration, that is the flag state of the vessel, or an organization recognized by it, that means a RO which is authorized by the flag state, or by a contracting government on behalf of the administration, that means a government of some other country on behalf of the flag state. So whether it is issued by the administration of the flag state or on its behalf, please understand DOA is always issued under the authority of the flag state. DOA shall be accepted as an evidence that the ship is capable of complying with the requirements of these regulations. It does not mean that the ship does not have to demonstrate compliance. It only establishes that she has the capability to comply with the requirements of the regulations. However, the compliance still needs to be demonstrated. The document shall accompany or be incorporated in the grain loading manual of the ship provided to the master to meet the requirements of the grain code. So this document of authorization can be a separate document or it could be incorporated in the grain loading manual. The document of authorization, grain loading stability data, and associated plans may be drawn in the official language or languages of the issuing country. If the language used is neither English nor French, the text shall include a translation into one of these languages. A copy of such a document, grain loading stability data, and associated plans shall be placed on board in order that the master, if so required, shall produce them for inspection of the contracting government of the country of port of loading. So all these documents, the DOA, grain loading stability data, and associated plans, they need to be placed on board so that the master can produce them to port state. Ship without document of authorization shall not load grain until the master demonstrates to the satisfaction of the administration or of the contracting government of the port of loading acting on behalf of the administration that in its loaded condition for the intended voyage the vessel complies with the requirements of the grain code. Again, for ships without document of authorization, the vessel or the master has to demonstrate the capability to meet the requirements of this code to the satisfaction of the administration or the flag state or the port state under the authority of the flag state. Now we move on to study the stability criteria for ships carrying grain in bulk as required by the grain code. The intact stability characteristics of any ship carrying bulk grain shall be shown to meet throughout the voyage at least the following criteria. So the demonstration has to be for throughout the voyage, not only port of departure. The angle of heel due to shift of grain shall not be greater than 12 degrees, or in case of ships constructed on or after 1st January 1994, the angle at which the deck edge is immersed, whichever is lesser. So that means for ships constructed on or after 1st January 1994, the angle of heel due to shift of grain shall not be greater than 12 degrees or angle of deck immersion, whichever is lesser. How is this angle to be calculated? The angle of heel shall be calculated as follows. First and foremost, we'll calculate something called as lambda 0. Lambda 0 is the heeling lever of the vessel under the assumed shift of grain as per grain code when the vessel is upright. So it is the heeling lever in the upright condition under the assumed shift of grain. And this shall be calculated by this formula: assumed volumetric heeling moment due to transverse shift divided by stowage factor divided by displacement. Once we get lambda 0, next we shall get something called as lambda 40. What is lambda 40? It is the heeling lever at 40 degrees angle of heel, which will be lambda 0 into cos 40, and cos 40 in grain code has been rounded off to 1 decimal place. So lambda 40 shall always be taken as 0.8 lambda 0. Once we have got lambda 0 and lambda 40, we shall draw the curve of statical stability of the ship, the GZ curve. In this green one is the righting arm curve. Then at 0 degrees angle of heel, we shall plot, you can see this red line coming up using the GZ scale value of lambda 0. At 40 degrees angle of heel, we shall plot lambda 40. Then A and B would be joined with a straight line. And what is this straight line? Straight slanting line AB. It is the heeling arm due to transverse grain shift, which may be approximately represented by straight line AB. Now where the two curves, righting arm curve and the heeling arm curve, they intersect, The angle of heel at which they intersect, this angle here, is the angle of heel due to shift of grain, and this angle shall not be greater than 12 degrees. And for ships constructed on or after 1st January 1994, this angle of heel shall not be greater than 12 degrees, or angle of deck immersion, whichever of the two is lesser. Next requirement is, in the statical stability diagram, the net or the residual area between the heeling arm curve and the writing arm curve up to angle of heel of maximum difference between the ordinates of the two curves, or 40 degrees, or angle of flooding theta 1, whichever is the least of the three, shall in all loading conditions be not less than 0.075 meter radian. This wording is verbatim from the code. What is it if we want to see it in the diagram? We just completed this diagram when we studied the first requirement of angle of heel due to grain shift. What is this residual area between the heeling arm and the writing arm curve? It is this area here. On left side, it is bound by this point of intersection. On the upper side, it will be bound by the writing arm curve. On the lower side, it will be bound by the heeling arm curve. What defines the right side boundary of this area? The right side boundary will be the angle of heel, which is the least of the three. 1. Angle of maximum difference between the ordinates of these two curves. That means angle of maximum separation between these two curves. We'll have to inspect our this statical stability diagram to figure out. Now, in case the maximum is, if it continues to increase up to 40 degrees, then that means we are not worried. But if the maximum separation is achieved or attained or reached before 40 degrees and then it starts decreasing, then that will be the limit. So the right side limit shall be least of the three. Number 1, angle of heel of maximum difference between ordinates of these two curves. That means maximum separation, angle of heel of maximum separation between these two curves. 2, 40 degrees. 3, angle of flooding theta 1 that we defined a while back. Out of all the three, whichever is the least, that shall define the right side boundary of this residual area, which has to be taken into consideration. Now in this diagram, we can see that the maximum separation is not reached up to 40 degrees. Then assuming that angle of flooding is more than 40, just for the sake of demonstration, let us assume that in this case angle of flooding is more than 40. Then the least of the three would be 40 degrees. Then the area being spoken about in this requirement is this one. This is the residual dynamic stability. And as per grain code, this area shall not be less than 0.075 meter radian in all conditions of loading. The initial metacentric height after the correction of free surface effect of liquids in the tanks shall not be less than 0.3 meters. That means GM initial GM fluid shall not be less than 0.3 meters. After loading, the master shall ensure that the ship is upright before proceeding to sea. Before loading bulk grain, the master shall, if so required by the contracting government of the port of loading, that is the port state, demonstrate the ability of the ship at all stages of any voyage to comply with the stability criteria stated above. So the responsibility, it's the obligation for the ship and the master to demonstrate that they'll be in compliance to the port state if they so desire. With this, we come to end of video 1. Hope you have understood the contents of this well. This will help you in doing the numericals we shall be doing some sample calculations in video 2. So please look out for video 2, which shall soon follow. Thank you very much for watching Marine Gurukul video series. Do share your feedback through comments, through your messages on email, and circulate this video as widely as you can. Thank you so much. Happy learning.